welcome back to the Shoogly Shed. I'm Ewan. This episode is going to be the sort of second part on the XS250 that I've been rebuilding. If you didn't watch the last episode, I stripped this bike down. It was one of the first bikes I built. Stripped it down and rebuilt it, just to neaten off some kind of ends that I hadn't quite kind of gotten up to scratch the first time I did it. And the other reason for rebuilding it is to rewire it using NWT's X21 system. A sort of smart, intelligent, easy wiring system for like custom motorbikes and people building bikes in their sheds like myself. So this isn't going to be like a proper how-to wiring video. It's not going to be that in-depth, but it's definitely going to have the sort of finer details with regards to applying it to this bike in particular. If you're looking for like a proper in-depth how-to wiring video for the X21, BJ from Brickhouse Builds has done a few videos on their systems, but also recently done one that's like a little bit over an hour long, and it's really in-depth. And I have actually watched it myself to get a bit of a head start for wiring this. He's full of tips and tricks. He knows the system inside and out. He's one of the brand reps for them, so he, yeah, like I say, he knows the system inside and out, and he's done a really detailed video on it. So if that's what you're looking for, go and check it out. I'll stick a link in the description, or maybe up in the corner just now, and you can have a wee look for that. Yeah, but like I say, this is just going to be a breakdown of putting the wiring onto this bike and the wiring systems that I'm setting this up for. Yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Right, a quick rundown of the electrical components on this bike in particular. Starting off, we've got headlight. It's a pretty standard headlight that's got a high and low beam and a sort of side light, parking light thing. I'm going to run bar end indicators, which should cover front and back indicators. It's kind of road legal in the UK, so that's what I'm going to go for. Minimalist approach, just bar end indicators. I've got obviously brake switch on the brake lever here. I'm not running a clutch switch. I've got two sort of idiot lights, as it were. I'm going to be mounted into the top yokes. There's going to be an oil pressure light and a high beam warning light. I'm not putting in a neutral light, and I'm not putting in an indicator light. I don't need to know that the indicator's on. I can see them if they're bar ends. The speedo is just like a mechanical speedo run off a cable, and it's backlit with a bulb, so it's just two cables going into that, so super simple. It's a points ignition, so we've got two coils, one for each cylinder on this bike, and then that follows we've got the points down the bottom. The points feed off the cam at the top and the camshaft, and then that goes into the ignition coils. We've also got condenser to stop the points getting worn out unduly. Aside from that, moving backwards, we've got we're going to have the battery obviously in the battery box. I've got a little tray I'll show you in a minute where the X21 is going to sit. There'll be a starter solenoid at the back. Obviously the starter motor is in the engine, that'll all be wired in. And then we've got a rear tail light. And, oh yeah, and a horn under there. I think that's everything. Can't think of anything I've missed. But basically it's pretty minimalist, one of the more kind of simple setups you could go for with a bike like this. I know in BJ's video he's done a bobber, which is actually even more minimalist. It's not got an electric start or anything like that, so yeah, he's got even fewer wires than I'll have. But either way, it's not a complicated rewire, and hopefully you'll find out that NWT makes it even less complicated and far more simple for, you know, average Joe to follow through if you're not a pro bike wiring expert. I've wired two or three bikes fully in the past from scratch, and just basically copied factory wiring looms. But I've never actually done like a modern bike brain install like your X21, so I'm quite excited to have a go at that and see what all the fuss is about. I'm going to go around and fit all the electrical components that I haven't already fitted, then sort of trace the wiring back from there. I can't fit the indicators yet because I haven't got them, they're on the way, but what I will do is run some cables out the end of the bars that they can get connected to. Probably going to run them off of connectors that then get pushed into the bar. The reason being, if an indicator ever failed, you don't have to start pulling wires back through the handlebar. You can just like pull the unit out, disconnect it, and replace it. So yeah, those would just be, you know, empty cables just now until I get them. Aside from that, I think I've got everything else good to go. So yeah, let's start bolting on some components and running some cables. Right, if you've not seen one before, this is the X21 unit. it's properly small. I mean, it's minuscule considering the capabilities of this little unit. Pretty smart that it's all fitted into there. NWT's kind of philosophy is trying to keep like costs down, so it's just a 3D printed case and all the money's been spent on the technology on the inside. So it's not super hard wearing, but it doesn't really need to be. You just need to take care of it. Don't over tighten the screws and you won't break it. It's what's inside that matters really. So it's a cool little unit that yeah, doesn't look too flashy or anything. It does what it's meant to do, you know. No frills. I'm going to be mounting this to this plate that I fabricated up. Basically, I've welded in some nuts here, it gets screwed onto there, and then this plate sits on top of the battery box. Conveniently enough, NWT also make batteries. These are lithium phosphate batteries, I think. Could be wrong, but I think that's what it means. But look at the size of that. For a battery running a motorbike, that is minuscule and it weighs nothing. It's also got a little built-in battery management system, so you can check the voltage of your battery. Yeah, smart little battery. So it's much smaller than the stock batteries for the XS250. I've padded it out with a little bit of foam to keep it nice and secure. But it slots in there nicely, like that. And then with the excess space, my little shelf drops in like that. And my X21 gets screwed onto there. Nice little neat solution, right? Next up I've got my starter solenoid, which is in here. Comes with all the cables you need for it. And it mounts just like most starter solenoids on little rubber tabs. It also has a built-in main fuse and a spare fuse, which is really useful. So you don't have to have a big fuse box or anything like that. It just runs off of basic fuses, and then that will just go onto those tabs in there. Also comes with the terminal covers for these, so you don't get any shorts against your frame. The lugs to put onto the wires, a couple of brackets there, and also a 3M pad if you don't want to use the sort of stock mounts, so your bike doesn't have stock solenoid mounts like this one does. You can just stick it down with a pad. Yeah, useful to have all these wee bits. Nothing more frustrating than buying a component and then realising that there's lots of wee bitties that don't come with it and you need to go and source them all. So that's useful. So I've got a fairly standard LED brake light in the back here. I've got the cables running up and under the top of the bike there. These are the old connectors from when they used to be connected. The little spade connectors, I'll cut these off. But yeah, just an earth, a brake and a tail light wire. So they're running up to here. This will all get tied into the X21 unit. So what I basically want to do is run all the cables from the components around the bike down to this central portion, because that will then allow me to start wiring things together. There's a few earths and stuff I need to terminate up at the top, but aside from that, most of those cables just need to be extended all the way down to here. Next thing I've fitted is the regular rectifier, which bolts onto the tabs from the old rectifier. I've had to take the airbox and the side panels off to get into that, but actually I'm just going to leave them off because it will make routing the wires and stuff a little bit easier. But the good thing is it does come with the connector with all the loose cables on it ready to be connected into the loom, so that just plugs straight into the regular rectifier, and then you can kind of wire in this side of it a little bit easier. Next thing I'm going to fit are the momentary buttons. So these basically replace regular handlebar switchgear. Literally the X21 can be operated using these two buttons, one for each thumb on each handlebar side. So I mean, really excited to have that kind of clean look on the bars. That's going to be achieved just by fitting these. They come with quite a handy little template that you can stick onto the bar. Shows you where to drill the holes for them. You drill a hole to route the cables, and you drill a hole and tap it to secure it with a little bolt, which all comes supplied. So yeah, I'm going to stick this on first, get these drilled, and then get these fitted up. Right, just a quick rundown of the cables I've routed through the bars now. Starting from the outside, I've got two cables that are going to go to my bar end indicators, a live and a ground. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm going to have wee connectors on these so that if the indicators ever fail, I can replace the units without having to chase cables back through the bars or anything like that. Two cables under here are going to go to my brake light switch so that when you pull the brake your light comes on. Got my momentary thumb buttons routed in as well. Those cables are already kind of pre-packaged by NWT, so they're quite easy to feed through. They even put a little bit of heat shrink on the connector points at the end to keep it all nice and neat so it doesn't catch while you're threading it through the bar. So nice little touch there. Just always thinking about these wee things, which is great. It all comes out of a central hole here. A little point I was going to make is these holes you drill over here are relatively small, so I'm not too concerned about them. But if you're going to bring all those cables out of one central hole, it's got to be quite a big gauge hole. And if you're drilling quite a large hole into your handlebar, you're going to obviously weaken the structure fairly substantially if you're drilling, it's like a 10mm hole or something I've got in there. So my solution to that is to drill it in a part of the handlebar directly between the two bar clamps, because it's probably the bit of the handlebar under the least amount of stress. Your bar clamps are kind of, you know, from there outwards is where the bar takes most of its stress, whereas this middle bit isn't really under that much stress, if any. So yeah, that was kind of my tip, is to drill the big hole for them all to exit from in between the bar clamps, so that you're not kind of weakening the structure of the important parts of the bar. Anyway, they're all coming out of there now. They're going to run sort of under the tank, nice and neat, so when this is all tied up, really minimal amount of wires coming out, which is super cool and super neat. You've not got the big, you know, switchgear cables coming out that you do usually. So yeah, I really like that solution, and for this kind of build it just keeps everything super clean, and yeah, that's the point I'm going for with this, I suppose. Another cool little point to make is when you order this stuff from NWT, you also get a throttle body, and nice and just sort of simple, nicely machined basic throttle body, because obviously most switch gears are kind of combined with the throttle body. So if you get rid of the switch gear and throttle body from your existing bike, you're going to need to replace the throttle body itself when you're replacing the switches. So this grip is just going to go onto the throttle body there. It screws into that, then the whole thing gets slid on. I need to route my throttle cables first, but you get the point. It just slides on nice and simple, so it keeps everything nice and clean. Right, I've sort of soldiered on and just run all the cables down the bike. Pretty straightforward. It's just a case of tracing each cable one by one to where it needs to be and terminating it. I've been using these Super Seal connectors. I think they're actually knockoff Super Seal connectors, but either way, they're quite good. They're a little bit more complicated to put together than the regular connectors, but they are yeah, better sealing. They shouldn't corrode. Sometimes regular connectors can get a bit of water ingress, and the connections can corrode and cause like bad grounds and bad connections in different places. So that hopefully will stop that from happening. Anyway, it's all just a bit higgledy-piggledy just now. What I haven't connected yet is my two LEDs for the top yoke or my bar end indicators, because I'm still waiting for those to arrive. But I have terminated little connections there for them when they arrive. Basically the loom is all together now. The only sort of two things left to do is to wrap it all to make it nice and neat, do all those sort of finishing touches to wrap it all and to make sure it's all routed in the best way it could be. And then last but most importantly not least is to connect all these cables into the X21 itself. So I'm going to stick a loom on it first, and then yeah, I'll bring you back when we're going to have a go at hooking it all up. Right, that's the loom all kind of wrapped up and neatened off. Front end of the bike is more or less done, bar obviously those bar end indicators and those wee LEDs. Like I said, I've got terminals ready for them to go in, so aside from that, they're done. Back of the bike's all done up as well, tail light and things. like I said, everything just needs to go into the box itself, the X21 unit. So some of the wires that you get with the kit have little connectors on them ready to just plug into some slots. So that's nice and simple. The handlebar controls, the momentary switches and the handlebars also plug into little slots, but those connectors need to be placed into the connector block. That's fine, do that. The rest of these cables are basically going to go into the screw points down here, these sort of terminals down here, and then there's a main, ground and live to go into this part here. It's not complicated, so the good thing about this design is that this thing lifts out, so I can lift it out, wire them all in, and then drop it into place, and hopefully that will be that. Okay, that's everything wired in, including the bar and indicators, because they just showed up in the post, so that's quite convenient. Just wired them into the cables that I had routed into the bars. All I'm missing is the two little LEDs for my oil light and my high beam, just waiting on them coming. I think they're coming from across the ocean, so they might take a wee bit, but like I said, I've got terminals ready for them to be plugged into, so that shouldn't be an issue. Aside from that, I think I'm ready to kind of fire the system up and have a wee go at it and see if it all works the way it should. I just need to connect the positive battery terminal, and then hopefully we should be good to go. So I'm going to do that now, and then there's a little startup procedure and a testing procedure that NWT give you in their worksheet. So I'm going to go through that, and hopefully it works. Right, I've just run through the testing and it all seems to be working, so I'll show you how the system works. Keys in the ignition. When we turn it on, we're going to get the marker lights will come on, but the indicator part of it will also flash twice, and the headlight does a soft start, so it goes from sort of quite low to full brightness. Just I think it's a sort of thing to protect the filament bulbs, just less likely to blow a bulb, I think. Anyway, there you go. So the headlight came on. I don't know if you noticed the marker light splash there, it's quite bright in here, so you might not have noticed them as well on camera, but they did. Anyway, that means that the system is on. My tail light is also on, if you can see that there. So we can check the brake light. The brake light comes on, brighter. Same with this one. So there we go, that's working. Headlight's obviously on. You can tap the button 3 times to turn the headlight off. Headlight's off. 3 times, turn it back on again. There we go, there's that soft start again. If we go quick tap on the right hand indicator, the right hand button, sorry, my indicator's flashing. Don't know if you can see that again, it's quite bright in here. Tap it again to turn it off. Same with the left hand, tap, on it goes. Tap to turn it off. Perfect. If I hold down this button, the horn will go. Yep, that's the horn. And 2 quick taps on it puts on the high beam. So we go, that's my headlight switch to high beam. 2 taps again, back to regular low beam. If I tap both these at the same time, I get sort of hazards. So tap, There we go, both my indicators are flashing at the same time, so they're sort of hazard lights. Tap again, they're off. Now if I tap this twice, my engine turns, like the ignition system is primed, so if I go, that should be it on. When I have my oil light and stuff installed, that will come on there too. Now that the engine system's primed, if I hold this in, the starter should turn. There we go, starter turns. As you notice, the headlight and the markers go off when that happens to save battery. So again, I'll show you that. Yeah, sorry, the markers stay on, but the headlight goes off. Obviously, I've not got the tank or anything on it, so it's not going to start yet. But I'm pretty sure the ignition system should be all fine. I can check that all with fuel in the bike. And then you just tap this twice again, and that'll be the engine off. So when I hold it in, nothing will happen now. So it won't turn over because I've turned the sort of engine prime power off. And then again, just to turn the whole system off, it's just the key. I think that's everything. I might have missed something, but either way, everything appears to be working totally fine. So that's kind of the whole goal of this rewire, was to fit this system and make sure it works. Last thing I'm going to do really is just double check all the wiring, make sure it's all nice and as neat as possible. Put my airbox back on, my side panels back on, and then yeah, job's done. Okay, job's a good one. That's the XS250 completely stripped, completely rebuilt, and completely rewired. Not put the tank of the seat back on it yet. Reason for that is Al of Kilted Bushido Builds, a good friend Al over in Ireland, is actually coming over to Scotland to pick this bike up and take it down to the Kickback show down in Gloucester. Unfortunately I can't make it, which is really frustrating, but such is life. But basically, part of the reason for rewiring this with all the NWT stuff was so that Al could take this bike down to that show to display an NWT setup. It's just nice to have it all laid out on the bikes to, you know, for potential customers and stuff to visualise it. So if you find yourself in Gloucester on the 18th, I believe, of September, go check it out. It's at Gloucester Prison. It's not a real, well, it was a real prison, but no longer a functioning prison. It's just an event space. But yeah, there'll be lots of cool stuff to do, lots of other cool bikes and stuff about, and Al will be there with a wee crew of NWT folk to chat about the products, and this bike will be on display for that. So yeah, like I say, if you're about that way, you find yourself down there, go check it out. As far as rewiring with NWT stuff goes, that was my first time doing it. It took a wee minute to get my head around some of it, because I'm used to wiring like in a sort of traditional way, like traditional wiring diagrams. But once you kind of figure out their sort of workflow and their kind of setup, it actually becomes quite simple, and really not only is the sort of personalised wiring diagram, but the full worksheets that you can download online, they're so useful, and it really could make anyone, no matter what your experience, it could help anyone rewire a bike. It really makes the quite daunting task, even for someone like myself who's done it a few times, the daunting task of rewiring a bike much more manageable. And another thing that's great about them is they're always available for tech help. So if you do happen to find yourself against a brick wall when you're rewiring your bike, they're always at the end of a message or an email or even a phone call. They will go so far as to video call you and talk you through the problem you're having. So I mean, I don't know many other, you know, suppliers or companies that are doing that kind of customer service. So yeah, hats off to them for that. For this kind of application, wiring in like a sort of wee classic bike and updating all the wiring on it, it just makes a huge amount of sense. The big 80s wiring loom that have ripped out this bike, you know, it is double the size of what's now in it, and that's from a neatness perspective, that's really nice. Yeah, I've learnt quite a few things doing this rewire, which has been great. And like I say, every time I do anything on this bike and I learn something, and yeah, you take that forward into your future projects. I'm looking, down the line for rewiring Musashi for the VMAX, which is a whole other kettle of fish because a lot more electronic parts, to deal with and to wire. So this has been a good sort of introduction to their setup, and hopefully I'll be able to carry the knowledge I've got from this over to wiring a bigger bike. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Do check out NWT, and if you're in the UK or Europe, Al Bushido is the supplier and the importer, and BJ Brickhouse Builds is sort of North America. So go and check them out if you're in those places and you fancy some of this kit. I highly recommend it. There's not really any other products on the market that are this simple and come with the backup of all the tech knowledge and help that they can give you. So yeah, I can't think of any other businesses out there doing the same thing. So yeah, hats off to them again. Anyway, as usual, please do give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you do subscribe to the Shoogly Shed channel. I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Goodbye. Before you disappear, I was just going to give a quick shout out to Zach from Moto Mango. I'm wearing your t-shirt, Zach. I've been chatting to Zach for a little bit on YouTube and on Instagram, and he also runs a little YouTube channel where he also builds bikes and customizes bikes and does some really cool stuff. So yeah, do check him out. He gave me a really nice shout out as well on his channel, so if anyone has found themselves here from that shout out, welcome to Shoogly Shed. So yeah, thanks for all your support, Zach. Share the love.